welcome to day 8, and Jazakallah khair for hanging in all this time. We've still got 11 days to go, and I'm hoping that each day you're getting some value out of what we're going through. And today's topic is the wide world of worship. I kind of picked that because at the moment the world is mostly accessible through the wide world web. And so I just sort of playing on words and letters there a little bit. But this is all about making 24/7 an act of worship, no matter the circumstances that you are in. So why were we created? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us over and over and over again, not just once, many times in the Quran, that he created the jinn and mankind to worship him. And I picked this verse because he said, I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. And when you take the wording like that, it kind of hits you that, okay, everything is supposed to be worship of Allah, right? That we weren't created for anything other than to worship Allah, right? Well, that's how I interpret the way that is worded, subhanAllah. So what is worship? Prayer, fasting, charity. So going to Friday prayer in Ramadan, Taraweeh, in, the Eid prayers, fasting Ramadan, fasting Mondays and Thursdays, zakatul fitr, all the different things that we have, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us as acts of worship, all of which are important. Well, especially those that are the mandatory acts of worship. And I am here to remind each and every one of us to make sure we are fulfilling the mandatory acts of worship. But I want us to expand our minds beyond that. Because what about the rest of the day? If we're not fasting, and when we do charity, in a moment the charity is done, so that doesn't take very long. We've got our 5 daily prayers. Again, that doesn't fill up the whole day. What about the rest of the day? If we were just created to worship Allah alone, what about the rest of the day? What is all of that for? So I wanted us to just have a little look at the meaning of Islam, or the Arabic word that means submission. And in this religious context means submission to the will of God. It also has the meaning of salam, as in peace, and tolerance, and all of those things as well. But I wanted us to focus really on the meaning where it's the submission to the will of God. So submission to the will of God. To me, that means that we are submitting to the fact that the situation we are in right now is according to Allah's plan. And we submit to that instead of fret about it, worry about it, complain about it. Think about, what if we didn't have this going on, what else could be going on? Like, we just submit to the will of God and we keep living. And it's this bit, the keep living, that I want us to focus on in this session, okay? So the conditions of worship, before we get into expanding our minds about worship, we really have to understand what is worship, or what are the conditions of something to be an act of worship. So first of all, it has to be, the intention is for the sake of Allah. That the only reason we're doing it, or our focus, our intention behind doing it, is to please Allah. And we all know that. It's why we say Bismillah, in the name of Allah, before we begin anything. So now is a really, really good time for us to check in with our intentions on what we're doing, and making sure that we really are doing things for the sake of Allah. The second thing is, it has to be done in a way that's pleasing to Allah. So if it is a mandatory act of worship, Allah has already set for us how that is to be done. So there are certain acts of worship where through the Quran and the Hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ teaches us how we're meant to worship Allah. So we don't make up our own way of praying, for instance. So for it to be pleasing to Allah for those mandatory acts of worship, then we need to be doing it the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do it, not the way we decide we want to do it, right? But when it comes to doing other good things for the sake of Allah, then we need to be using the manners that are pleasing to Allah. So if we are doing things for people, that we're doing them in a way that is pleasing for Allah. And I'm not going to get into the details of what that means today in this session, but more this session is about, I want you to open your mind to 24 hours a day being an act of worship, okay? So how can 24 hours a day be an act of worship? These are just some ideas. They are not all the ideas. So I picked this one because who doesn't like to sleep? If we are sleeping, so even if it's an afternoon nap or we're going to bed at a good hour, we're turning off Netflix so that we can sleep at a good time, and we're wanting to sleep so that we can be healthy and energetic the next day to do more to please Allah, and we make that our intention when we fall asleep, whether it be for the night or for a nap, then inshallah, we are still accumulating good deeds while we sleep, because we are, number one, trying to sleep in a healthy way, which would be pleasing to Allah, and we're making our intentions to please Allah, to have the energy that we need. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as beings that need sleep, and our body needs sleep, and it's part of caring for our body, right? So sleep can be an act of worship. I thought I'd start with an easy one, right? Eating. So if we are eating healthy food, if we are eating with the intention to nourish our body and care for our body instead of because we love the taste of the food or just want to eat for the sake of eating, if we are doing it intentionally to care for this body for the sake of Allah, because Allah blessed us with this body is just temporary. It's a temporary gift or temporary vehicle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in order for us to live this dunya, this worldly life. And our job is to look after it. So if we're looking after it, and in this particular case, looking after our children's bodies by feeding them healthy food and doing it all to please Allah, for the sake of Allah, then this too can be an act of worship, inshallah. And why do you think we say Bismillah before we start eating? Caring for Allah's creation, and in this case, I chose the example of changing a nappy, diaper, whatever you want to call it, because you probably wouldn't think that this is an act of worship. But, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted us with these little ones to care for. They are Allah's creation, not ours. They're a gift to us. And if we're caring for them, then inshallah, if we're doing that with the intention, to please Allah, then again, even changing their diaper or their nappy could be an act of worship. Especially since if you don't, they're likely to get nappy rash and suffer. So you're protecting them from suffering. You're doing what is needed, to care for them, subhanAllah. Working from home. A lot of people are working from home right now, and even that can be an act of worship. Because, while we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider, we also have to tie our camels by making an effort. And at the moment, some people are having to be very creative. I've had to be creative in my business. How am I going to earn money? Because a lot of the work that I was doing was with schools, and schools are shut. So working can also be for the sake of Allah. Obviously, there has to be two conditions: that you're earning the money for things that would please Allah, like caring for your family, providing for your family, or for providing charity, helping others, that the type of work you're doing is also pleasing to Allah. So the intention around the work, you have to make sure that you're doing it in a manner pleasing to Allah, and you're doing it for the sake of Allah, right? Cleaning the dishes. Now, that seems to be a never-ending task in this house particularly. There seems to be always dishes in the sink, no matter how many times a day I clean them. But again, keeping the dishes clean, keeping things clean, this is all part of an act of worship if we do it to please Allah and to help look after our family, right? Cooking. So cooking the food, which is another job that we're probably doing a lot of, or even a lot more of with everybody home, is preparing the food. Again, if we do it with the intention to please Allah, to provide good meals and sustenance for our family, for ourselves, in order that our bodies can function well so we can do more to please Allah, then inshallah this is also an act of worship. Caring, for the elderly. So we already talked about caring for the younger people. Now, there may be some limitation on what you can do with this at the moment because of isolation and especially the elderly being protected. But if you have elderly living in your home, taking special care of them in this time is also an act of worship, doing it to please Allah, because again, you're caring for Allah's creation. At the beginning of our life and at the end of our life, we reach times in our life where we need that extra care and extra support. And so those of us who are in that middle part of our life, in between those two stages, at various stages in our life, our job is to care for the younger or care for the elderly. I mean, if we don't do it, who's going to look after them? So again, this can be an act of worship, providing the intention is right and the way we do it is pleasing to Allah. Just general cleaning of the house. And I don't like to put stereotypes here, so we've got one of the dads cleaning the house here, because this can be an act of worship, and all of these things can be an act of worship. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female, right? I didn't particularly want to point this class just at us women, because at the moment, most of the men are stuck at home as well. So now is the time for them to think about alternative ways in which they can worship Allah, and helping out around the house could be an act of worship for them as well. So keeping the house clean, doing the chores around the house, if we're doing it because we're showing our appreciation to Allah for what He's blessed us with, the shelter He's blessed us with, the house and all the provisions He's blessed us with, it's a way of showing gratitude by caring for it, making our intentions for Allah, then inshallah we can get reward for it as well. Teaching our kids, spending time in learning. A lot of us who really weren't signing up for homeschooling are now finding themselves in a role of supervising at least our children's learning from home because schools have shut down. So this also can be an act of worship, because we are taking care of our children's education, which is something that isn't just the school's responsibility anyway. It's all of our responsibility along with the schools to educate our children. And this is actually a really useful opportunity for us to actually see what our kids are learning at school and get a bit of an eye into what's happening in our schools, what they're learning. So, we can see for ourselves if in fact our kids are learning what we think they should be learning, subhanAllah. So it could be quite an opportunity for us if we engage and get involved in our children's learning from home. And, playing with our kids, having fun with them can be an act of worship as well. I put a mum here playing rather than a dad. I'm trying to mix the stereotypes up because it's interesting. Dads actually tend to be much better at being fun for some reason than mums, and mums tend to get way too serious. So it's time for us to be fun mums, and I will be doing a whole session on being a fun mum. I'm also doing a session on parenting for paradise. I think I put that in the schedule anyway, because just to learn how we can make our parenting pleasing for the sake of Allah as well. And again, cheering up family members. So here I've got them FaceTiming, because there's many family members we can't visit or be with right now. So making the time and the effort to FaceTime or just call other members of the family, cheer them up, see how they're doing. This can also be an act of worship. It may be the only thing we can do for them at the moment, but just remember, a cheery voice at the end of the phone can be all that someone needs when the chips are down, right? Just shifts their thinking from woe is me to, oh wow, someone cares. Remember, we're always living in the feelings of our thinking in the moment. So here's just an example. There are so many more examples I could have chosen, but I just picked some pretty ordinary, standard daily things and showed you how they can be an act of worship. Can you do all these still? Absolutely. There was, apart from maybe visiting the elderly, if they're not living in your home, that may be restricted. But everything else that I showed you there, you can still do that. There's nothing stopping you fulfilling your day, filling your day with acts of worship of those kinds. Seriously, SubhanAllah, you can make your whole day an act of worship just with those that I shared. And if you can be really creative and think outside the square, you may come up with even more things that you can do as well, SubhanAllah. So yes, these are all things we can still do. You just need to make sure that your intention is to please Allah alone, and that you do it in a manner that's pleasing to Him. And then inshallah, you're earning reward on the day of judgment, or that will be on your record on the day of judgment, and will be part of the reason why you enter Jannah, inshallah, right? And it's all just thought. You're always living in the feelings of your thinking in the moment. So if you start thinking about the possibilities, and it's all just thought, you're always living in the feelings of your thinking in the moment. So if you start thinking about the possibilities, you will find creative ways to worship Allah 24/7. Seriously, I'm not joking. If you open your mind, quieten your mind, the creativity that is in you will emerge, and you can start seeing the possibilities of acts of worship to be done even now during these times when we're in lockdown, inshallah. So, as I say every day, that rhymed. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. Invite others to join us. I'm trying to share a really positive message out there, get us thinking differently about what we're going through, trying to overcome the mental health issues that are growing in number. So please share this far and wide as much as you can. 19 days, cov19.com, that's the link so they can get all the information. Or you can share the YouTube video. You can't share the version that is in the Facebook group because that doesn't work. You can't share directly out of the group. But if you share this link with others, or share the YouTube videos as I post them, inshallah, others are going to be lifted up and have a positive attitude towards what is happening right now. Remember, Islam is us submitting to the will of Allah. I want to help our brothers and sisters in Islam submit to the will of Allah during these trying times and earn abundant reward 24 hours a day, inshallah. So please share, and share again, inshallah. Just because you've shared it one day, share it every day if you can, because every day is a different topic. You don't know which topic is going to inspire people to watch it, but we want to get this positive way of looking at things out there, inshallah. And it's just going to get more positive from now on Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.